Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have the music going. Oh, it's been a long weekend. It's not over yet. How's it going, everybody? Thank you for joining me on a beautiful Sunday morning. I guess afternoon. I stayed up pretty late last night again. Figured we'd sit and talk about the top 8 deck lists, turn it into a little bit of content. You know, that's the game. These will be uploaded to YouTube later. And I'll have the deck list and everything. Except for Jacob Messiers. This one, he had a little bit of trouble with the submission form. So he's got just an image, but I'm sure if you guys talk to Jacob, you know, he's Final Round Gaming. They stream, I think Mondays. Mondays, like, pretty consistently is the day that they stream, either that or Tuesday. So I'm sure if you guys talk to him, he'd be glad to do his own deck profile and things and provide you with the link. But he played Godzilla. He was one of our 2 Godzillas in the top cut. Not a surprise at all. And it looks like he took a lot of inspiration from Bill Evans. Right? I think all of these attacks, except, of course, Knockdown Blow, check a 4. Knockdown Blow gives you +3 to your check to play a lot of these cards, which is a card I thought I'd see a lot more of, honestly. Like, Knockdown Blow, when I first read it, I went, oh, this is the enabler. This is the card that lets you play big attacks, you know? And it's cool that it has a meta-relevant deck, right? Bill has seen quite a bit of success on it. Jacob has picked it up, you know, similar style. I don't know exactly. I mean, so if it's I wish I had the Ultra link because I could just sort by control, but I'm pretty sure these are all 6 checks. So if these are all 6 checks and all, you know, 4 check attacks plus Knockdown Blow and City Rampage, I'm pretty sure they're like the same deck, right? There's not much wiggle room. So I think it's very cool that Knockdown Blow and like big attacks have a place even post Smiling Titan. I think people might just be upset that it's Godzilla who can play all kinds of stuff. Like, it's a very versatile deck, but I think the most interesting thing is he's not mainboarding Dismantling the Wall, which I think Bill was. And that was the card that gave me the most trouble. Because Dismantling the Wall is just a big fat throw. That's the one that I always had to block when Bill played it because it was so easy to block. And you were gonna be blocking almost as much damage as a regular attack, right? It's a 2 mid for 9 printed. I can actually just move this over here, I think. Yeah, because I don't have the deck list. So Dismantling the Wall, it removes a wall counter, but that was never relevant. I've never played a wall counter character in the tournament, but 2 mid for 12 throw, I have to react to this. And there's a lot of little +1/+1s that you would put on it. So it ended up being like a 4 mid for 14, you know? And I'm like, well, I can completely block like a 9 damage move, or I can block 7 damage off this very easily, right? So with City Rampage and the one diff that gives +1/+1, it's pretty easily the easiest attack to block, but still not like free, especially if you commit out to deal damage. So Dismantling the Wall, I think, goes in the main board. I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that one, but it's definitely a lot of personal preference. There's just not much else to really say about this deck other than it's very smooth, it's very simple, and it's very effective. Next up, we have Barlow on Mimic. This is another deck that I've played against quite a bit. This deck has definitely torched me. And this one's really cool because you see that we have the 26 asset cards. I can never decide how many assets are enough. When I play Mimic, I struggle to get that blend right. I feel like I don't check a lot of assets. I feel like I draw 1 or 2 attacks a turn, and then my character gives me 1 or 2 attacks, and it never really feels like enough. So it seems like like Barlow has kind of cracked the code. He's kind of figured it out, and we've seen, you know, Mimic success from the last event. So I think maybe they have figured out the blend here. 18 attacks feels low for a 6-hander in this format, but keep in mind that this is like, what, a 62 card deck? Yeah, so it is pretty slim. This is still pretty close to a third overall of the deck, and of course the character is adding an attack to your hand that you want. So you don't have to be playing 4 ofs all your best attacks. We see that there's actually no 4 of attacks in the deck, which is very cool. Very, you know, kind of Elder Toguro-esque in the sense that you get the selection from the discard pile, so you don't have to max out on anything. He certainly had that Cheerful Uppercut in hand quite a bit. We've got 2 Cheerful coming in from the sideboard, 2 Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken in the sideboard, so we can go up to 4 of a single attack. There's 1 attack in the deck where you can have 4 copies of, and it's Vast Hybrid Chimera Kraken, which makes all the sense in the world to me. Talking about the assets, Knott's Flask is obviously huge. It's a big stat pump, or, you know, soak in both directions. 2 Battle Arena makes perfect sense. 4 Trigger, of course. 4 Vertical Maneuvering Equipment is probably the most interesting thing here. I don't see a ton of... Oh, there's a decent amount. I was going to say I don't see a ton of momentum ramp, but between Determined and Rapid Speed Slash, both being at 3 ofs, there is a decent amount. So the 4 Vertical Maneuvering Equipment is pretty nice. It also just commits for 4 damage, which is super solid. And, you know, it's a very important meta-relevant asset. I am a little surprised to see it as a 4 without, like, more focus on just getting momentum, but once you hit people a couple of times with this deck, you know, having that Vertical Maneuvering Equipment really slows the game down to a grind. 2 Cape of No Return makes sense. 2 Ultra Compressed Weights is a cool meta call. A lot of people don't believe in Ultra Compressed Weights at all. A lot of people, you know, ever since this card came out, it's like, it's supposed to kill Asui, it's supposed to kill whatever, you know, Denki 1, it's supposed to stop all these different decks, and it really hasn't. So I'd be interested to hear if Barlow has actually, like, ruined someone's day with this, because I can tell you, I tried playing this card against Asui, and it might have bought me like a turn, but it was in a format where you were not OTKing people unless you were Asui, you know, and you either had to have drawn all your Texas Smashes or be Asui 1, and she would go over the weight. She would just play on +1 progressive and send you to hell. So very cool to see this one making it onto a main board. Lots of attacks in our first 2 top 8 decks. Lots of attacks in the sideboard, which is very different from the past. Very different. In the past, you'd almost always see actions like Runaway in here, which makes sense, and you'd see like more, you know, interactive foundations like Incredible Display. These are very normal. And then Cheerful Uppercut is like that sideboard attack card because it is primarily a defensive thing. But we're also seeing, you know, toolkit offensive pieces in the sideboard, which I think is like a neat evolution. It's just something that I don't think I've seen a fully attack sideboard yet. But here we've got Runaway plus all attacks. Here we've got Runaway and Incredible Display plus all attacks. So very cool stuff. Gouging Needle, I think, is the biggest surprise for me here. The +0 high block that you can tutor up. Super cool, super strong. And then just having like a powerful 3 outlet, because I don't think there is another... Yeah, we're not running the Walk the Dogs, so we don't have a powerful outlet. So I think this kind of fits a Walk the Dog mold, and I would be super curious if this is a replacement kind of for Walk the Dog. We are like much higher on high blocks and low blocks, which, you know, typically makes sense, but in this format I'm looking out for low attacks, especially from this deck, like low attack, low attack, low attack, low attack. They all swing pretty big if you have a momentum. I don't think there is a high. Oh, there's fast. Okay. And Swarm by Titans is a high. So there's a few high attacks, but it's a lot of lows and mids. So I'm wondering if Gouging Needle is that fast, powerful 3 low attack that is just kind of sitting in for Walk the Dog, or if he really doesn't want to play Walk the Dog. Walk the Dog could also just be like what, $160 for a playset, and I don't think there's too many decks that want to play a single Walk the Dog. So very cool stuff, very interesting stuff. And if it is true that this is like a quote unquote more budget version of, like the full deck, I think that's even more impressive. So I'd love to hear from Barlow. Maybe someone could get him on a channel to do a deck profile, get his thoughts on Mimic, because he's had, I think, the most success, at least playing the same Chaos Mimic over the last like half a year. And I'd really be interested to hear like what his thoughts are on things like Gouging Needle, playing 3 Shocking Entrance. The deck seems like it's prepared to play at a slower pace, and yet it always seems to present a lot of pressure too. So that is the sign of a good offense when you have good early game and good late game. And he seems to be doing it with, attacks that we just don't see too often, like Swarm by Titans. I don't think I've seen anyone else play this card after like the first AOT 1 event, so it's just very neat. I also wish I could ever see a Colossal Detonation go off on stream. I thought we were close to it, but we didn't get it, so that's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for the Colossal Detonation wipeout. Can you believe this doesn't end your turn? Next up, we have Kyle Wright on Byakko. Kyle Wright playing the Earth Byakko. We've got 24 attacks out of 78 cards. So this one's kind of interesting because I would normally feel like you need to have a higher percentage of your deck be attacks, but most of these cards are going to get milled anyways. So it's kind of like the bigger deck size does get shortened anyways. So the consistency issues are a little different, right? I do think the attack lineup is very cool because it's a mix of throws. We've got 4, 8, 12 throws. We've got the cards that tutor, massive size, ultra regen, thunderous roar probably most often. We've got one card that flips, right? We've got one card that flips things, but it does it defensively. It does it targeted, so that's kind of a big deal. And I guess Tiger Scream also flips. I should say this one also has a targeted flip, but it's Byakko only, basically. So very cool stuff. A nice, healthy mix, right? We've got our core is throws that are going to chip you down by being a 4 diff that swings for 10, and you're going to take half. So even if you block these 4 diffs, you take 5 damage. Feels amazing. We've got the tech attacks that make things work, we also get a big damage bonus on our block mods. Do we have like a huge block mod anywhere? Just 4? Yeah. That's pretty cool. You can't really set it up with Byakko, but there is like some +4 block mods in here. So Flying Takedown can get super huge like randomly. Mimicry is a really cool one in this deck. I love playing Mimicry in Byakko. I love to use Mimicry to copy things like Thunderous Roar. I've copied Massive Size once or twice, but it's pretty much always Thunderous Roar just to have that backup. And also because your rival can't flip Mimicry the way that they can flip a Foundation normally. You need like different tools to deal with an asset than a Foundation. So having like a backup Thunderous Roar that is not a Foundation has some pretty niche use. For Referee Jury, we're not surprised to see that one bit at all. This is how, spoiler, the first place deck did a lot of it surviving, and Byakko does kind of a similar trick. You can play a Referee Jury and put an attack down to 4. Then you can use Byakko to stack Referee Jury on top of your deck, and then you're going to draw that Referee Jury when the attack deals damage. So very cool stuff there. Of course, you're going to see more damage reduction to go with the Referee Juries to pad out our 5 hand size life total. But I wanted to talk about Mikasa defeats the female Titan because Kyle was doing something that no one else is really doing. I'm going to double check, make sure that these first two didn't have specifically throw hate, right? None of these hate on throws. None of these cards, none of these hate on throws. You can maybe say runaway, but that's not real. That's not targeted throw hate. Neither is this technically, but this is something I don't think you'll see in any other Byakko list, especially not at 4 copies. So after you block an attack, that attack deals no damage. Once five-handers start blocking against you, things are really bad typically. And this allows that blocking corner turn where they preserve that life total really well much sooner. And it allows you to do it with pretty much any card in your hand, you know, anything you can block with. So I think this is really nice. And I think that it's something that a lot of players will take for granted. You know, they'll think, oh, well, I'm a five-hander. It's a format where you don't block much, but you block one time, right? And if that block is a 14 damage throw, you know, and we saw it, and it just so happens that this tournament was won basically by a throw deck. You know, I think this should be maybe in your sideboard or something. It's not that throws are super prevalent or that you should expect them a lot, but this allows you to play a game plan where you go down to one card in hand against any deck. If you hold a +1 mid block and it's your only card and you're only going to block one time anyways, which is how most decks operate, but especially five-handers, Mikasa Defeats the Female Titan shoots up in value enormously. So I think this is one card that more decks should be playing in general. I think five-handers should be not afraid to play this card because it reads like oh, well, this is a card for blocking and for decks that like to block and, you know, maybe want to live forever via blocking. But I think the reality is that this is a one-time use card that, you know, helps you when you have less options defensively. This spreads out your blocking options. And because it's only going to help you block one time, and we're in a format where you're only going to block one time, I think its value actually goes up. You know, if it was a format where you were attempting to chain block 4 or 5 attacks, you know, because I've played this card in Rodan, I've played this card in, you know, I played versions of this card in old Life Wall decks that block everything. They block more than any other deck, and that's what they're good at. But in those decks, I'm going to have 5 or 6 block zones, right? I'm going to have the ability to tutor block zones. This makes a lot more sense when you're only blocking one time where you only have one card to block with. So I just want to talk about Mikasa Defeats the Female Titan because it immediately sets off like this, you know, foreign, why is a five-hander doing this? But I think Kyle has some really nice insight into playing defense in this game. And, you know, it's peculiar at first, but I think if you really dive down deep into the reasoning behind it, it'll make a lot more sense. So very cool stuff from Byakko. Love to see Tiger Scream getting played. I think he was is 6th place, so almost into the top 4. You know, everyone in the top 8 was 1 win away, but very, very cool stuff. Lots of high diffs. You know, this is otherwise mostly standard Byakko fare, but it's not like super gimmicky, and it's not doing the unblockable, which I think you should maybe include like 1 or 2 copies of the unblockable. That's the only real thing I'll say is I do think the unblockable has a lot of value in this format where people are blowing the board up and going down to a smaller foundation count. The unblockable is how I lost his Godzilla because I couldn't outbuild it, right? So not on the turbo mill plan, but maybe that's why we're not doing the unblockable, right? We don't have like the Kirishima and Bakugo card where when you mill it, they also have to flip one. So maybe that's why maybe we're not super in on flip everything. But man, that overhead unblockable, it's pretty good. Here we've got Cameron Caldwell. I apologize, I got your name wrong on the announcement. It's Cameron with a K. I knew that, I just copied it from somewhere else. So I feel really bad because I know when people get your name wrong, it's not fun. But he's here on Hanji Zoe 4 Eyes. I'm pretty sure I've played against him playing this in David Toombs' Winter Invitational. Or in like the last event right before it. And this deck is super scary, guys. This deck is an incredibly scary deck to play against. It is one of the most explosive decks. If you're not expecting the Tri-Gravity Beam, you will get blown out by it. 7-hander with this much damage pump and this much ramp. I think Hanji Zoe might have the greatest like singular turn in the format, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, if you give every character like their best possible hand and stage. They can all do ridiculous, unbeatable stuff. But I think like for like an average, I'm gonna have one turn to explode. I'm gonna have one turn to run my offense, and I want to be almost like attack agnostic, right? Like it doesn't matter much which attacks these are. They're all low difficulty. They're all solid speed, except maybe Vial Seizing, but that one also draws a card, so, and it plays defense. But it also makes all your attacks, pseudo speed and deadlock. So it does technically have a speed element to it. But yeah, the the Grenadier Bracers in this character, Lunar Ring being main boardable is huge. This being like a normal part of your offense in this format, while we've got Mimics running around, while we've got Cape of No Returns running around, is super, super cool. I think it's one of the best things about this deck is that you can play Lunar Ring with a completely straight face, and it counts cards that your rival destroys, right? Cards that they sacrifice add to this total. So when they're using their defensive sacrifice abilities, when they're doing weapon clash on all your attacks, you are getting it back on Lunar Ring. So this deck is super duper scary. Hanji's Thunder Spear Strike is really nice in this deck because it's pretty much always going to get the 2 speed and 1 damage. So a 4 diff that comes in as a 6 low 5, super duper solid. Sometimes it's a 3 diff. Sometimes it has powerful to end the game. It's probably the best attack, after you've gotten momentum. It's almost certainly the best attack to follow a Tri-Gravity Beam. So very, very solid stuff. I love that you get to play cards like Risky Gamble and, unflip them, flip them back down, destroy it, whatever. You get the full use out of it. You get full use out of I'm With Yous. Very, very nice stuff. And of course, Death has all the really solid staples right now. I mean, learning the standards is coming back because blocking is difficult, and we're a damage reduction deck. We've got like mixes of 2-ofs of things like Always Cool and Weapon Clash. I think we could maybe run a bit more Loss of Consciousness just to snipe, but I'm being nitpicky. I haven't played the deck, but this is the interesting one for me. Concern for Annie is after this card is discarded or sacrificed, your attack gets +2 speed. So I think the only sad thing here is it does have to be face up to be sacrificed, if I'm not mistaken. That would just make it, in line with learning the standard, or not learning the standards, learning to harden. Lots of learning in My Hero. I guess it's a school, whatever. So concern for Annie, if you could put it face down and then do it, this card's insane. I don't know if that's, I'm like 99.9% sure you can, but I can never be 100% sure with the rules in this game. So, don't lambast me in the comments if I'm wrong on this one, but yeah, this character gives tons of damage, and whenever you've got characters that give tons of damage, whenever they find a little bit of speed, that seems to be the most potent mixture. Characters that give speed trying to find damage struggle pretty often, but characters that give damage and then go out and find speed usually tend to do a lot better. So I haven't seen anyone running the Concern for Annie. I thought about playing it in Berthold. It seems like it's a Berthold card, but I never pulled the trigger on it, and I don't think I've seen this card get used in the games I played against him and the games I've casted of it. I don't think I saw this card actually get used, so it's kind of wishy-washy on this one, but he's playing 4 of it, so he believes in it, and I would love to see it like work. I would love to see this like pop off where maybe we're destroying on a Tri-Gravity Beam that becomes unblockable, and we don't have to snipe the mid block, we snipe the low block for the Thunder Spear after it. That would be a sick play. Like, that would be such a cool, like Tri-Gravity Beam snipes a mid block 90% of the time, right? So that would be something cool to see. I don't know, I haven't seen this one come into use yet, but never forget that when you've got your big damage pumpers like Godzilla, like Mimic, like Hanji, the thing you gotta solve is you gotta solve the speed equation. So if you don't have like a big EX move to rely on, you're gonna need cards like Concern for Annie, and you're gonna need cards like Irwin's Final Charge, which is definitely like a huge boon to this deck. Once you play this, you're trying to end the game, so sacrificing your whole stage is fine. Works great with the bracers. It's the fastest attack in the deck just from its own printed ability. So without EX3, Irwin's Final Charge seems like a really good game ender. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather. Next up, we have Tamron Cardwell playing Life Ymir. This is not a surprise to see this character in top cuts. Like Godzilla, it is the only one that put 2 characters into top 8. I'm very excited that Tamron Cardwell can make it to this event, because I believe up until almost the last minute, I don't think he was going to make it. And so I'm really happy that he was able to. There's some pretty interesting choices here. I don't think this looks like a typical Life Ymir deck. There's a lot of spice in this deck that I think is really good. A big thing is a lot of zeros. I see a lot of zeros to get that early turn build, and I see the +0 low, +1 high that we can combine with Incredible Display to make blocking more than once a little bit more viable. So I really, we'll excuse me, we'll look at Andrew's list a bit later, but I don't think that, one is strictly better than the other. But I do think Tams is much spicier. I do think that Tams has the ability to run away with the game with cards like Spirit Gun Final, more so than the list we saw Andrew run. Andrew's list was super good at controlling his life total, gaining that life defensively with cards like Brief Respite, and being able to tick up like that Ymir counter way higher than any other Ymir deck, or at least as high as possible. But I feel like Tam's deck is less reliant on the life gain counter and is just playing like better quality attacks. Spirit Gun Final also gives you that lose 3 health quotient. It also kind of fits in that Tetra Terror dual needle lunge slot. I do think this deck could benefit from a dual needle lunge or a Tetra Terror, maybe in the sideboard or something like that. Just maybe like 1 or 2 copies, because when you're in those situations where dual needle lunge is really good, when you're in those situations where Tetra Terror is really good, they are game-winningly good. But I do like the choice to not play Rejuvenation Smash, or Rejuvenating Smash. We're not playing the meeting with Hanji. We're not playing any way to discard cards. Oh, they can't be picked up by Zeke. Yeah, we were going to get to that in a second. And so where was I? Yeah, so the dual needle lunge and the Tetra Terror are just like, I think people are glued to them because not only do they work together, but they have that lose 3 life quotient that people believe Ymir really needs, right, to get the ball rolling on her own. But Spirit Gun Final can do that too, and it's technically less investment to do so as far as like your attack lineup goes, because this is just a solid card all the time. And once you do get like Ymir damage bonus ticked up, being able to play one big attack I think has a ton of value, especially when you're going to be destroying cards. You're going to be committing cards with Spirit Gun Final to get that speed up. And early in a turn, you want to start with one big poke that your opponent has to either commit out to block, or take, half their health. And so having cards that commit, that you can use every part of the foundation on with Immortal Shapeshifter early in a string also has a ton of value. I think Attack Titan's Haymaker is supremely undervalued. I think Zach mentioned on commentary he was surprised that Andrew wasn't running it. This is not only a stun 2 move that has a weird blocking restriction, but it becomes a foundation for later, so it can help you be aggressive on those early turns with the front side of Ymir, and then also still help you get to a place where you transform on turn 3 and stuff like that. On top of that, you guys are going to see a little bit of a mill sub theme. But I want to finish off with the attack lineup where Midst of Despair has fallen off the radar. I don't know why. This card is absolutely bonkers. This card is absolutely insane. You are going to be gaining health. You are going to be playing a 4-diff 5/6, which we talked about with Hanji's Thunder Spear is an amazing rate. So I'm really surprised this one has fallen off. I feel like you got to be playing at least some number of it with Ymir to have those really crazy extension turns. But I think Andrew's list was more focused on playing one big attack, but that's like where Spirit Gun Final is here. But teaming with the Attack Titan, Midst of Despair plus teaming with the Attack Titan says this deck is playing every attack it can. Every attack you draw is going to be played, and I believe in those instances where you're facing Jaw Titans, where you're facing Hero's Upbringing, cards like teaming with the Attack Titan, cards like Midst of Despair, and even Instant Shining Flash to a lesser extent are gonna be the ways that you overcome that counterplay. One of the things that we do have to talk about that Tam mentioned in chat here, which I think you guys can see it at the bottom. Let me move the chat over a little bit just in case people start chatting through this. But it's the manipulations of Zeke Yeager. This is where the spice comes together. This is the salt of the earth for this deck. Enhance mill 1. If the card milled this way is a ranged or Titan card, add it to your hand. So that includes foundations. I don't know if there's any foundation targets off the top of my head. It looks like there's not. But this is a Titan attack. This is a Titan attack. This is a ranged attack, a ranged attack, a ranged attack, and a ranged attack. So all of the attacks get picked up by the manipulations of Zeke Yeager, and all of these attacks pretty much help you play more attacks, right? Entering the Titan Force is a big draw 2. Midst of Despair helps you ignore progressive, -1 difficulty. Attack Titan's Haymaker and Spirit Gun Final, not so much, but you know, you could argue that this becoming a foundation helps you for later playing attacks. And then having your hopefully 1 difficulty 5 mid 5 that you can change the zone on is just super cool. So I like this build a whole lot. It's got the staples that you need for Ymir right here in the 2 diffs. I love Desperate Plea. Any deck that's playing for Desperate Plea immediately has my attention, but I think the number one thing that Ymir decks need to copy going forward from this is the Replicator Enthusiast, especially if you're going to be playing a 5 difficulty foundation like the manipulations of Zeke Yeager. Replicator Enthusiast is such a huge pickup for this deck. Not only is it just going to build you a foundation from your hand, right? Enhance, remove, you choose a foundation in your stage, you build 1 foundation from your discard pile with the same name, and your rival gets to build the top card of their deck, but like, whatever, man. We got the manipulations of Zeke Yeager. Like, if you get to build a new training method from your discard pile and then build another foundation from your hand, then do the Ymir form on your second, you know, before your second attack, this gives the deck so many pivot points, and you can do this defensively too, right? This is during either player's turn, which is super risky to give your rival a foundation, I know, but it is such a huge pickup. The ability to surprisingly ramp against your opponent, I think, is underrated in Ymir. I'm surprised more Ymir decks are not actually playing attacks that like ramp themselves, but it is, you know, those are also like the lesser statted attacks, so I get it. And yeah, Zeke, yeah, Tam's in chat saying I didn't talk about the deadlock, but the deadlock is just deadlock form flip, pick up a Titan or ranged attack. So it's more of the same, but it's like I'm just going to hit, you know, I get to flip and I get to hit. And yeah, Zeke can be done on defense. Zeke Yeager, the manipulations of Zeke Yeager should give you an insane amount of card advantage over the course of the game on multiple turns, you know, throughout both turns. It should be absolutely insane. And Replicator Enthusiast goes perfectly with it because the gate to this card is that it's 5 difficulty. And between cards like New Training Method, between Ymir being able to play it and then build it down, between Replicator Enthusiast, like, this is the spice. I don't know if you should copy it for every Ymir list. Tam has obviously put a bunch of work into this, and you know, it fits his style and his preferences, but I do think that Replicator Enthusiast should be in just about every Ymir list, and especially when you combine it with cards like Manipulations of Zeke Yeager. Says Tam says card is crazy. Just wasn't a great call into the mirror. They could pop off harder than me with the self burn. Yeah. So that is important to note. I think at the very end of the day, in Top Cuts, it was a Ymir mirror. The Ymirer is so annoying to say, but the into the mirror matchup, there's not a ton of overall tech here. And the other Ymir lists are so hell bent on just big number, right? It's just big Ymir number, big overwhelming Ymir number, and maybe a little bit more card draw. And so that turn 2 pop off is maybe a bit better for Andrew's list, and we'll see it soon. But I think the spice here is super cool. You know, it's hard to ever say one list is objectively better than the other in this game. And I'm a big fan of Attack Titan's Haymaker. I think if Andrew had some amount of stun in the games he played in the games we watched, things would have been a lot simpler for him. And I think if he had lower investment moves that can maybe threaten higher damage earlier without the synergy needed from Ymir, I think he could have seen, or just longer strings, right? Just play even more attacks to waste out that momentum and stuff like that. I think you can like find a good mix of the two styles, but I love the 4 of manipulations of Zeke. I love the 4 of manipulations of Zeke Yeager, and I'm really stoked that we got to see it in Top Cut. So definitely go check out Tam's VODs. I assume he's got them up on Twitch, or they might be re-uploaded to YouTube, because this is definitely a sick deck to watch. I've only gotten to see it a little bit, but it's very, very cool when everything is working together and you're seeing, you know, the synergies kind of cross-pollinate. It's a very cool take on Ymir, and it's very different than like the just life go up, life go down, life go up, big damage build. Next we have Jonathan Yates. I hope I'm saying that right. The instinct these days is to say yeet, but I believe it's Jonathan Yates. He also played Godzilla. He's our second Godzilla. This is similar to the build I played. It's got the 4 Vast Hybrid. It's got Smashing Stomp, the 4 Determined Advance. Excuse me. It's got the 2 Unfazed and the Walk the Dog. Now, what I didn't play that he is playing that I think is really cool is Titan Cliff. This card helps turbo through your deck. It's got a big consistency hit to it, and it also builds you 6 checks, which are pretty valuable when you're playing a high difficulty attack. So Swallowed by an Abnormal is very, very nice in this deck when you can target build it. We do have Unfazed, Walk the Dog, Determined Advance. Like, more than half of our attacks are actually a target for this card. But cards like Walk the Dog are actually a 4 diff, which is sick. And Titan Cliff rebuilds you a foundation, so people will argue that it's kind of like a 5 diff. So very, very cool stuff. The only other 6 check I think though is Pass-Through Walls. So there's not a ton of targets for it. We're not like full on the gimmick of just 6 checks or anything like that. But I did think that Titan Cliff was very cool. Godzilla, and especially the way the format is positioned, you got to see your important cards early. And the earlier you see them, the better your tempo is going to be, right? So I think the one of Battle Arena is kind of interesting. I think you got to play 2 of this card, or maybe 3. I know the terrain makes it so you don't want to get flooded with it, but Battle Arena is so good for finding those Godzilla once per game checkmates that I'm surprised people aren't like trying to play 4 of it. But you definitely don't need it, right? Like, Battle Arena is not like the most necessary thing. The biggest thing to me is the 4 ofs in this deck. 4 of. All the foundations are 4 ofs. You know, City Rampage is a 4 of. Most of the attacks are 4 ofs. It makes the math on the deck pretty simple, right? 64 cards. Everything is a 4 of or a 2 of except the assets. So very cool math here. Very cool, like, deck building where he just said, I'm going to pick all the cards I like, and we're just going to run maximum quantities of it. So this is a guy who knows what he wants from his deck and has maxed out on it. There's not a lot of wishy-washiness here. So got the full suite of 8 zeros. We've got the card draw with Fearsome and Horrifying. We've got Pass Through Walls and Broken Psyche for interaction. We've got Strategic Meeting, which is one of my favorite Godzilla cards, and it fights with Award the Victor. So we've got the Horrifying Realization, but we don't have the Award the Victor combo in this deck. So maybe that's not something he likes. Maybe that's not something that Jonathan has access to. But I feel like that combo is a little bit better than Strategic Meeting. As much as I like Strategic Meeting giving me that momentum, and I even played like one of it with Award the Victor, but it's so much better to just draw the attack and have the +2 to the check, right? Like it clears progressive, it bonuses your check, and then if you have Horrifying out, you get to loop the attack is so good. And it's crazy because Strategic Meeting is almost that good. Like I truly believe Strategic Meeting giving you a momentum is different and valuable enough to play it with Award the Victor, but we are 4-ofs on everything. We're not splitting here. This is the card I was really surprised to see, Short-Lived Promotion. This is a card that we've seen different versions of in the past, and they're almost always a 4-check, and they very rarely get played. When a card like this does get played, it's almost always been in like really, really slow, suffocating wall decks. You know, this is the kind of card I would expect to see in like a Recovery Drill going based off of previous uses of it. But the, you know, during your draw step, during your beginning of turn, you can respond and flip and draw one card, basically. That timing has been reserved almost exclusively for, like, slow decks. So seeing Godzilla use it is pretty interesting here. I'm not sure. I haven't, like, dissected this card and thought about all the implications that the draw step has versus, you know, just having a 1/5 flip to draw a card during an attack. But the important thing is you don't have to draw an attack to get the card draw, which is why it's a 2-diff, right? Fearsome Transformations, you have to be in the enhanced step to do. Horrifying doesn't plus you a card. So this is very cool in the sense that it's like brick protection. You know, if you brick on 6 cards, Fearsome can't draw you the 7th card, but Short-Lived Promotion can. So I feel like this deck has a little bit of like an anti-bricking, you know, vibe to it, between Strategic Meeting being able to add the attack to hand instead of momentum, between Short-Lived Promotion being a not within the enhanced step draw. Horrifying Realization also fits into that anti-brick protection where we have a form speed draw. So I think this is very cool. I love what this deck is doing outside the enhanced step, despite being a deck that is pretty much solely focused on attacking in the enhanced step, right? 4 Broken Psyche is absolutely wild to me with Determined Advance going around, but this is, by and large, you know, our only defense. Cape of No Return and Broken Psyche carried us all the way to top 4. So I can't really argue with the results. You know, Unfazed is the new lower decks attack that is absolutely stomping in Godzilla. It can be a little bit clunky to use, but we saw Jonathan use it absolutely beautifully. You know, even without the echo, when he was echoing it, like all parts of the game. You know, but he went up against a deck that wasn't really interested in blocking, unfortunately. So very, very cool stuff. Very simple, I guess. Like these two Godzilla decks have like a theme of being super simple, but also very creative. And I think Godzilla gets kind of a bad rap for being like this multi-purpose, all-in-one tool where he can just play like higher card quality and just make everything good. You know, very similar to like All Might 3 or like Mirio in the past. So I get it, but I think people are really underestimating like the little bit of creative influence that goes into these decks, because they're never carbon copies. They have the same shell, of course. You know, we all have staples. We all have like common cards throughout formats, but there is creativity in these lists if you're willing to accept it. You just have to be open-minded to it. So going for like very straightforward game plan, going for hyper consistency, going for brick protection, that could be something that you adapt into your Godzilla list going forward, and it might help you out. Next up, we've got the other Ymir list. This is what I would consider like a more traditional Ymir. You know, I wouldn't say it's not spicy. There's definitely spice, but I think it's spice that we've been introduced to before. Notably, there's no actions or assets. I do think this deck could benefit. Where is it? I do think this deck could benefit from the replicator enthusiast. I don't know if Andrew's, gone out and got the lower decks yet, but this deck is pretty much hinged on dual needle lunge and Tetra Terror to drain your life total to give you access to the life gain. But the only 4 diffs we're picking up are Mikasa's Flying Knee Strike and entering the Titan Forest. So Tetra Terror, I feel like, actually kind of falls a little behind on this list. I think people get duped into dealing with the Tetra Terror more than they should. But Mikasa's Flying Knee Strike is also an incredibly high statted 4 div. So in a deck that's only worried, about numbers and getting to the winner's circle, Mikasa's Flying Knee Strike might be the best 4 div to pick up. So very powerful offense. I mean, Rejuvenating Smash is super powerful offensively. It gives us momentum as well as dual needle lunge. So this deck is making a great use of getting momentum. Powerful 3 we saw win some games off of defeating the Colossus Titan. This one is absolutely a banger of a card. And I think this one is like the more traditional, I guess, or like the more like fitted for Ymir version of Spirit Gun Final. But I do think the 2 cards definitely bring something different to the table. This deck is very much just like high powered, like card quality, I would say. And it's got a little bit more card draw, right? We've got the Meeting Hanji and the Rejuvenating Smash and the Entering the Titan Force. So we're really trying to draw 2 cards at a time. We are not trying to draw 1 card at a time. And I feel a little lackluster because this deck is like so efficient at just losing life, gain life, big number, big stats. I do think it's missing out on the speed outside of a couple of specific cards. Rejuvenating Smash with EX can definitely win you games. Dual Needle Lunge having EX and defeating the Colossus Titan giving itself +5 speed. These are all really, really huge deals. But if we're fighting between all of our momentum and the only speed we're getting is from our character, I do think that we could... I don't know, maybe we don't need it. People aren't blocking anyways. I'm probably just being a fuddy-duddy because this deck gives an ass load of damage, but it also does give speed, so I'm probably just underestimating the +2 speed. I love to see the Keiko's Aid coming back. I think people got off Keiko's Aid because people were just fighting over it, and decks like Godzilla kind of naturally, compensate for it. But I think we're also in a format where if you get multiple of these out, it's the only thing that can save you. So this is harder to play around than learning the standards. It's harder to play around than Breaker. And, it sticks to the next attack, right? It's not the next card. It is the next attack. So I do think that Keiko's Aid should be making a return. But I do think you need to pop 2 at a time to really feel safe. So love to see the Keiko's Aid, love to see the Vast Strength. We saw it be pretty relevant a couple of times. Maxed out on the life gain with Brief Respite makes sense. Pump Up is also the other spicy thing about this list that I think people gloss over. Typically you're gonna block first and then use your reset. What Pump Up says is you have to use your resets earlier than you want to. You have to use your foundations before you block. And that creates a problem for a lot of decks, especially with Ymir, where you typically don't want to deal with the first attack or 2. They get exponentially bigger. So Ymir will make the first attack for 10 or 11 damage, and you have to look at it and go, well, this isn't the big one, which is crazy. It's crazy to look at Ymir's attack lineup and go, she's sending for 8, 9, 10, and they only get bigger and bigger and bigger as she goes. So Pump Up is a great addition to this deck. It works offensively and defensively. Defensively, it encourages you to block early, which I think is kind of where we're at. People are blocking the first attack to see if it's a poke, to see if the opponent is trying to draw some cards to do something different with a follow-up. So it rewards you for blocking early, and it punishes the opponent for blocking early, which is just kind of our de facto state. It's like the level 0 of how to play the game is don't give them anything for free, make them extend to do damage to get value out of their attacks. So I think Pump Up is a little slept on, despite the fact that we are not in like a crazy blocking meta. But if you get one foundation seal out of this card, it can be absolutely game changing. Unfortunately, in the finals, we saw that Pump Up had the wrong timing, though, because his opponent was not a deck that was interested in blocking. His opponent was not a deck that was interested in playing more than one attack in a turn. And for all intents and purposes, I gotta say, this just seemed like a perfect meta read. And so Corey Nelson on Water Recovery Girl took down the entire event, got first place. I did see a message in Discord, don't quote me, I'm not 100% sure, but I do think, from what Corey said, I think Andrew beat him in Swiss, and then he got the run back in finals, which is such a classic, just a classic card game, classic, competitive tournament story. So if that's true, that's kind of amazing. I don't know for sure. I was just kind of scrolling through this morning, and I saw a conversation, so I might have missed the context, but if so, that is an amazing story. But we see this is almost all 4 checks. We do have Sword Get Longer, which makes perfect sense. We're a good symbol character who wants to build, a bunch of foundations. Yeah, he's saying that's exactly what happened. So that's an amazing story. That's why you milled him game 3. You were intentionally not killing him. That's pretty sick. But so the Sword Get Longer makes perfect sense in this deck. The Desperation 4 is kind of funny, but doesn't come up that much when you gain all that life. Other than that, it's just we can afford the high difficulty, because if we commit 2 foundations to play any of these 7 diffs, we're just going to destroy them to make this a throw, right? Sometimes we get refunds even with Enormous Axe. So very cool stuff. We did see at one point, I want to mention on Enormous Axe, there's one point on commentary where Zach was very confused by an Enormous Axe build on defense. And I told him, I'm like, Corey's going aggressive. He's playing for next turn. He's confident he's going to survive, and he's being proactive. And I believe that was the game where we turned like all four Enormous Axes sideways and made a 30 damage throw. That was lethal on partial versus 14 health. So do not underestimate Recovery Girl's ability to start playing for the next turn. If you guys remember, the most broken characters in early MHA format were the characters that would game plan on your turn to set up their next turn. Characters like Kirishima 1 unerrated, characters like Momo 1, characters like All Might 3 in those early days, and then later even in the middle, right? Overhaul is like a character who's like, I'm going to put this face down on your turn. It doesn't help me right now, but I'm going to play it ignoring progressive later. Characters that were getting momentum from getting hit, characters, so don't underestimate Recovery Girl's ability to sculpt damage pumps when you've already got your defense set up. Especially, again, like we're going to be generating face down so easily with Sword Get Longer. So a lot of stuff that works together here. In the winner's interview, Corey talked about Devour being probably the biggest thing to change Recovery Girl's quality of life, Devour being, if it deals gain 5 flat, is absolutely insane. Even if it deals just 1 damage, you get a full 5 life. There is definitely a like Magic the Gathering style life gain in Attack on Titan. Between cards like Brief Respite, between cards like Ymir's Regeneration. Although we've had regeneration cards after you take damage before, that's very Universe-y. But cards like Last Second Rescue are just, Ymir's Regeneration on steroids, right? You got to have the momentum for it. But this is the number one card everyone had pointed out was going to take Recovery Girl over the top, and it's probably true. I didn't want to believe it. I've been downplaying Recovery Girl for a hot minute. I'm not gonna lie. You know, I'm also, to be clear, I'm also someone who plays throw hate. I'm gonna go through after this and look at all the throw hate that was in this top 8, and I've never left home without throw hate in the sideboard. So, but yeah, Last Second Rescue is the card that says you cannot let Recovery Girl get momentum. Being able to wipe out a singular attack was supposed to be the life symbol's way of dealing with these big attacks. Instead of giving the life symbol like a reset to 0 or a reset, you know, below printed, it had Idune Box, but that wasn't super effective against like these 7-8 difficulty attacks. So in Attack on Titan 2, they gave the life symbol Last Second Rescue. The issue, of course, is that Recovery Girl can build this during the damage step and respond with it at the same time. So you don't even have to have this in your stage. We don't even have to play 4 copies of it, because it will naturally destroy itself. Recovery Girl will destroy it if she has to. And for every momentum Recovery Girl has, that is effectively one attack that you have to waste damage-wise. If you're not bringing, you know, response cancels, if you're not bringing life gain counters like Jaw Titan attacks and things like that. But we saw, even with Jaw Titan attacks, even with Incredible Display, that wasn't enough to stop Corey from gaining all his life back. We also saw Clutch, Toughest Punk, and Junior High. This card interacts with Determined Advance, where other damage reductions don't, because this doesn't reduce the damage of the attack. This reduces the damage you would take by 3. So very important distinction when it comes to cards like Determined Advance. And even if people want to play something like the Elder Toguro one-shot combo, you know, this is a card that doesn't reduce the damage like Sports Festival Stadium says. It reduces what you take. So very cool stuff there. You know, other than that, I think everything here is a life gain, yeah, or damage reduction, or an attack wipe, pretty much. So we saw Moment of Peace turn Recovery Girl into a 6-hander in Deadlock, which is very cool. The Flip a Foundation, this attack gets +1 or -1 speed if it deals gain 1, is a great way for Recovery Girl to start gaining more life than she takes with cards like Ymir's Regeneration and Last Second Rescue, right? If you take 10 damage and then you gain 10 life and then you gain another one, you've, you know, gone above where you started. So other than that, I think what's really making the deck work is Referee Jury plus Struggling with Studies. And because of the way that Recovery Girl works, we don't have to play 4 Struggling with Studies. We can, of course, loop this as well. So every time we pick up a Referee Jury, we can destroy Struggling with Studies. We take damage, we rebuild Struggling with Studies, we draw a card off Jury, and we're not only, you know, plussing cards in hand at this point, but we are effectively looping this reset. Jury plus Weapon Clash and Beneath the Armor means you're gonna take pretty much the exact amount that you want, which is 1 or 2 all the time. So everything has hit a critical mass. I think what's really cool about this deck is, aside from Enormous Axe and Beneath the Armor, oh, there's a couple here. There's a few 4-ofs, but I love the way that this deck doesn't have to play 1 divs. It only plays a few 0 diffs, and they're 0 diffs with purpose, not just like, well, I need to have a good early spam build. So this deck flips the normal game of universes on its head. It plays the game in a different way. If it's getting too much of a departure from what is universes, that's not really for me to answer. That's for the design team to answer. I will say I was reached out by a UVSG employee, and they did ask me for the deck list to collect data. So going forward, I don't know how many people are going to see this video, but going forward, we are going to be using the UGN deck builder for submitting deck lists, because I have gotten the response that they are using this data from these community events to help influence their actions and things like that. So that's very good to hear. I did send them all the deck lists so that they have all the information. I doubt anything's going to happen to Recovery Girl before Nats, and I'm not 100% sure anything has to happen. I do think that there are ways, you know, it might be format warping to say I do think that there are ways to combat this deck, right? And I'm going to go through now, and I'm going to look at how many pieces of throw hate are in the top cuts. We have 2 adaptable anatomy, which is by far my least favorite. This is such a bad faith shield. I don't know. We have access to face shield. This is so weird to me. I guess you get to block with a better block mod, but so maybe 2 pieces, 0. Is there any in the main board? Maybe I'm skipping some in the main board and we haven't seen any yet. Invincible body might count. Well, we have 4 face shield in Byakko, so Kyle, who had the only main boarded throw hate, also had 4 face shields. So I'm curious, maybe there's a world where did Kyle play against Corey at all? I don't know if you guys played each other, but I'm curious if maybe this deck would have actually given Recovery Girl some trouble. You know, if he's able to like turbo flip everything, and like every foundation that you build, if it's not used immediately, will get flipped on the next attack, combined with Faith Shield and Mikasa defeats the female Titan, maybe we can deny that momentum. Sacrifice for the cause also can come into a 4 of and stop the damage reducing effects. We are talking the deck list right now. I'm going to be posting these on the YouTube. When this gets uploaded to YouTube, I'll have all the deck lists in the top comment. But this is the top 8. If you're looking for deck lists for the whole event, I don't know if I'm going to be posting every deck list, but the top 8 deck lists will get posted with the YouTube upload. So yeah, I'm wondering if this is a deck that might have been better suited for fighting Recovery Girl, because Byakko's really good at one-shotting. He's really good at flipping every single thing. We don't know. So the one thing that this deck is missing that the other life decks have is incredible display. So we don't have a way to cancel the response once last second rescue is available. So that might not be that might not be the case. This might be worse for fighting last second rescue, but I don't know. I'm really curious. I'm really curious now what this matchup would look like. I don't know if Kyle and Corey fought during the tournament, but so far this has been the deck with the most throw hate. It's got the highest health total, but it also mills itself the fastest. So I don't know, man. I would love to see this matchup of the 2 5-handers. There's a very good chance that Corey just mills out Byakko because he's dumping 6 cards on every attack. But there's also a world where Kyle has the throw hate to slow down the momentum generation and to present, 30 damage moves. You can destroy 2 face downs at a time as Recovery Girl to prevent like the Thunderous Roar from ticking up high, but Corey said himself, blocking is for losers when Determined Advance exists. So this would be super interesting. This is basically a 5-hand size throw deck as well. If that is the case, if it becomes like we have to be all playing 5-hand size throw decks, then of course some kind of shakeup would have to happen. But we do have the 4 of response cancels in this one, but I'm still not seeing throw hate. I'm still not seeing like dedicated anti-momentum cards. That's the other equation, right? You could also say like if we just hate on Recovery Girl's momentum all the time. But there's not a ton of momentum hate in this top 8 either. So not a lot of throw hate, not a lot of momentum hate. These are maybe the things you guys will have to trend towards, but this is your Webcam Warriors winner, Corey Nelson on Water Recovery Girl. Very, very cool deck. Very awesome to see Recovery Girl I think finally win an event, right? I don't think Recovery Girl has won an event yet. To do it via mill is absolutely amazing. I'm super jealous. I want to win a game via milling people out on stream. It hasn't happened for me yet, but I'm super jealous that this is like the second or third tournament we've had where the grand finals, someone got to just mill their opponent out from playing hardcore defense. So very cool stuff. And guys, in the future, you're going to have to watch out for this recovery girl list. I don't think it's going anywhere. It might be time to start tuning your Nats sideboard for some anti-throw, anti-response, anti-life gain. But, you know, you got to see that recovery girls also got that interaction into the sideboard too. So be very, very careful. I'm going to call the stream here. It was just a quick little top 8 deck list stream just so I can, this is basically so I can use YouTube's resources and Twitch's resources to export this to YouTube. But I am going to collect all the deck lists. They will be down in the top comment pinned below. Thank you all for hanging out with me on Twitch. Thank you all for watching this on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe, do all the good stuff. And hopefully we'll have more webcam warriors in the future. I had an absolute blast running this tournament. Everyone was an absolute darling during it. I haven't had any negative feedback yet. So hopefully, knock on wood, that was everyone's experience, and we can have more awesome community events going forward. That being said, thank you all to everyone who made it possible. Everyone who signed up made it possible. Everyone who, you know, donated prizing made it possible. Everyone who watched on Twitch made it possible. So thank you to every single person involved. Next time, I'll probably have someone else run the stream for me because it was taxing my computer a little much. And I have baby computer parts, so we'll figure that part out. But the next one, you know, is gonna be better. And I cannot wait. I'll see you all in the future. Love you.